Rumpa-pum-pum, my little cherubs. The holiday season is here, and the Brooklyn Nets keep losing. We dive into the Nets Heat game coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, the NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now, new customers can get a finish off the season strong opportunity with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. And Doug, we get started with a classic. What we said is not what happened.
Hey, you want to just set your watch to something, have us come on the podcast, make any definitive statements about really anything, and then just watch the next game and have the exact opposite play out. I mean, watch, rinse, repeat with this, because last podcast, literally, fewer than 24 hours ago, we were like, Ben Simmons turned the corner. Looks like he's going to shoot more. Like this could be a version that they can really sort of unlock as the season goes on if they have the right guys around them. And conversely, Keon Johnson has really struggled. And it's like unclear, like sort of what his role is going to be. Then we go into the Heat game. Simmons, 30 minutes, two shots. I can't even say this. 2 shots in 30 minutes, 4 points. Keon Johnson, whose efficiency has been terrible this season, 50% from the field, 40% from three, 15 points in 28 minutes. So it's like, here's what I don't want to happen. Here's what I don't want to happen. The Nets get Cooper Flag. I'm just going to start.
There we go. Yeah.
I'm going to start saying the definitive statements that I don't want to happen. In the hopeful effort that these things do happen. But, overall, not an unsurprising loss, even with the Heat missing Jimmy Butler here, missing Terry Rozier. And so we'll get into the game, but we always want to acknowledge that when the things we say, just flip, the script gets flipped, almost immediately in the next game. That's kind of just what sports does to you.
Of course, 110-95 is the final in this one. The Nets only put up 17 points in the fourth quarter, and the Miami Heat defense, you could say that, or you could say the Nets offense, one or the other, ended up preventing Brooklyn from being in this game down the stretch. 11-18 now on the season. And oh, by the way, for those of you, we'll talk about it maybe a little bit more on the back end, but no movement here in the Tankathon standings. This is what happens when you're near the bottom or top of the draft board and everyone's losing games. Hard to make a lot of hay sometimes, but to your point, there's the Ben Simmons of it all, the Keon Johnson of it all. I thought it was worth, you tell me if you want to go a different direction, starting in here with Noah Clowney, because he's been playing more minutes. Dorian Finney-Smith out of the lineup right now, starting lineup right now, 30 minutes, 6 of 13, 4 of 10 from deep, gets to the line 3 times, knocks those opportunities down, 19-point performance for him. And that's putting along with what he did in his previous game, where you and I had talked at the start of this season, and we did minute allocation, and I pushed for Noah Clowney to maybe even be in the starting lineup. Okay, fine. Shame on me. There's a lot of veterans on this team. But now that he's seeing more consistent minutes, we're starting to hopefully get a build in the right direction here where we can think about 50 games, 45-plus games of Noah Clowney getting real developmental experience. And it looks like as soon as you clear out these vets, it's going to be Noah Clowney's time in the starting lineup.
Yeah, just with DFS out of the lineup, this is not that surprising. Down this many guys, Zaire Williams, DFS. I mean, they are down. Other guys that probably would for sure start in this place if they were on the court. But overall, Clowney's development is interesting this season. On the one hand, you like the minutes have increased slightly since last year. It's not. This could be another one where let's see what happens after I say this next thing and then what happens next game, but. It has not looked amazing. I will say this. This has not been exactly to me where I thought we would land with Clowney. I have a couple, kind of examples I can point to, but I'm very glad for the developmental opportunity. I'm glad the minutes. I think the minutes will, from 19 minutes a game right now, I think that will only increase as the season goes on. I think he'll probably land somewhere at like 24, 25 minutes by the end of the season. Maybe that's pushing it a little bit because they already have so many in the bag, but I think let me put it this way, from here on out, I think that's where the minutes will kind of land. But I do have not concerns, but I would say that there's parts of his game that have not really grown here with the increased playing time. I'm wondering if you're kind of seeing the same thing, but so good news on the minutes, good news on the playing time. And there's room for growth here on sort of what he's bringing on a game-to-game basis.
Yeah, I would say it really is. Now I can't wait for the next game here, and we'll see all the aspects of Noah Clowney just flourish on the court. But I would say that off of last season, obviously, no one gets more bullish on some of the young guys than me. And we also, at the time that Noah Clowney was drafted, said, okay, awesome, maybe it'll work out, but this is going to be a multi-year project developing this young kid. Then he looks pretty good at the end of last season, really flashes in a handful of games. And I think he's talked about playing between the 4 and the 5 at times. He's talked about understanding assignments, positioning offensively. We talked about him being a sponge around learning where he needs to be on the court and what his role, and you give him something in the film room, he applies it immediately. I think it's a longer runway. And it's not a bad thing. I just think that it's a longer runway because on a possession-to-possession basis, you see these flashes of some nice moments, but I wouldn't say – I'll start offensively even before defensively. I wouldn't say that his game offensively looks the way I thought it was going to coming into this year. Does that make sense? Like the perimeter shot's awesome. He's taking 3-pointers. That's great. But I kept looking at Nicholas Claxton and saying, yes, but now be more fluid, be a little bit more on ball, be able to do a few more things, maybe in dribble handoffs, setting screens. Like there's every aspect of the offensive game just needs probably another this whole season to fully round into form. That's okay. But I was disappointed that it isn't maybe already there or at least closer.
Yeah, the 3-point shooting's been good, and I actually do like the idea that he's taking a lot too. 5 3-pointers in 19 minutes a game is really high volume. That's a very good sign for what you ultimately want him to become at 36% for a 6'9", power forward / center, whatever. He probably projects more as just like a good power forward at this point than like a true center. I don't think he's probably going to put on enough mass to get all the way there. So I think that's like a really good sign. I think we saw last night too. So a couple of things. One is like the scoring from the field, and maybe this is just lumpy. Like he's 6 for 13. He only takes 3 shots that aren't 3-pointers last night. Like that's a really kind of like weird stat line for a guy who's 6'10". Now, some of this could be the function of the offense, or if you're going to play a floor spacing 4 next to Nick Claxton, and Ben Simmons and Claxton are already going to be occupying every piece of the paint in the restricted area, then maybe there's no place for you. Yeah. But that part is a little weird to me. And then the part where all those other shots that aren't 3-pointers, the efficiency is super low at 39%. Like this is like a little weird for a guy with his like size, frankly. Like most guys that are this big, that you think it's like, hey, you're going to shoot threes, and then everything around the rim is going to be a make. But that's actually not the case. Like his field goal percentage is only barely higher than his 3-point percentage. He's taking 5. It's just such a weird shot diet. Like 5 3-pointers a game, 7 field goals a game. So he's basically only taking 2 shots a game that aren't threes. And for a 6'10" guy, now, okay, is it the function of the offense where they want to run DHOs? Do they want to make sure he's a floor spacer, and every once in a while he attacks a closeout, and they're not making, they're not doing any pick and roll with him? And like, okay, that probably is not totally his fault, but it's a very weird stat line. Like and I have another thing about defense I want to get to after the break here, but like, it's so weird that this is what, like, this is his shot chart. His shot chart is like all threes. He's a 3-point shooter. That's all he does, basically. It's very odd.
Well, you go back 2 games prior against Toronto, 3 of 10 from the field, 2 of 8 from beyond the arc. You go back 2 games before that against Memphis, 4 of 10 from the field, 4 of 10 from beyond the arc. Strictly a 3-point diet. And then
again, 2 shots more per game. 2 shots more per game that are not threes. He takes. Yeah. He basically takes. This is actually a number. He takes 5 threes a game and 2 shots that aren't threes a game. That's the stat. That's a super weird stat for a guy as a power forward center.
And you wonder about the congestion now, right? And no more Dennis Schroeder and the functionality of the offense, and no Cam Thomas right now. So there's probably a lot of things you could point to and say, like, will this look a little bit different as this team evolves? Maybe. But the other side of it, and we'll get into the break, not only the defense, but also what is it going to look like as you take away some of the better talent on this team ahead of the trade deadline? How do you make sure that Noah Clowney and some of the young talent gets to develop fully? That plus Ben Simmons, plus Keon Johnson, all coming up here right after the break.
And before we get to that, let you know that with Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, Nets lose to the Miami Heat. Obviously, a game where the offense was at a premium, and the Nets couldn't find any of it. But the bottom line being they struggled. We talk about Noah Clowney. We're going to get into his defensive side of his game as we expect him to see more minutes. But before we do that, the three-pointing, two-pointing percentages and where he ranks in those is probably crystallizing to how much he's taking right now for a man of his size.
Yeah, I hadn't looked at this before, but so on the season, his I just had in front of me his excuse me, his overall percentage of 2-pointers to 3-pointers. He takes 69% basically of his shots are 3-pointers, right? And so if you sort by players who have taken more than 50 3-pointers this year, so like players that have actually played, let's just say, he ranks 30th overall, which, you know, that's basically like one per team. But it's really, so two funny things about this. One, if you look at the players above him on the list, it's almost all like shooting guards, like AJ Green, Sam Merrill, Dean Wade's a power forward, but like all these like floor spacing guys, Sam Hauser, right? Nick Batum, Peyton Pritchard, Isaiah Joe, Dante DiVincenzo. You get the point. Like these are like pretty much just prototypical shooting guard guys. Actually, right. Tyrese Martin's up here because he's been bombing threes. Everyone is basically like prototypical shooting guard. And then you get to him, and then you know who's right below him. And this actually speaks more to maybe it's just the Nets offense. The guy right below him is Dorian Finney-Smith. So Dorian Finney-Smith and Clowney have exact same percentages of threes to other shots. So that's the part where you're like, oh, that's just a function of the offense then. Right. Because this is he's basically playing in DFS's spot, right? Like this is just how the offense runs. They want these guys to sort of sit at the perimeter. And so I don't know. I can't tell if it's like I can't tell if it's signal or noise here, and there's probably not enough to like really discern. But it's just funny. I don't think if we went into the season, let me put it this way: prior to the year, if I gave you these numbers for him, we'd be really confused about what's going on. It's like, hey, 70% of his shots are threes. That's all he's doing. It's like, what? Because I just don't think it just doesn't really make sense. Like it really makes you raise an eyebrow around sort of like what they're developing him to be at least at this stage, which is very early.
That you hit it there at the end. What are they developing him to be, right? I don't think when he came in, we already, we've been through this with Nicholas Claxton and, how he's best fits and the size and everything else. When we saw Noah Clowney on the court last season, I think we said, all right, this is a 4, right? That's what this guy is going to be ultimately, I think. And I think you'll have a lot of success at that if you can get the right 5 to pair with him. And I actually have some stats, low-level minutes on Nicholas Claxton, Ben Simmons, and Noah Clowney and how it all overlaps. But to be at this point, and because it is different, you mentioned Dorian Finney-Smith. The reasons why we think about Dorian Finney-Smith as your traditional 3-and-D win is because he doesn't have the offensive repertoire or the offensive, take it in the spirit's intended, athleticism to be a guy that you get the ball into his hands and you think about taking a defender off the dribble, finding an opening in the lane and saying, I can go attack that. That's not a part of what you expect from Dorian Finney-Smith. I think, at least in my mind, you probably agree, is that Noah Clowney, we thought about, because we saw last year, him on ball out on the perimeter and saying, okay, I'm going to take this ball in hand, make a couple of dribbles, maybe take on a defender, work into the paint, and then assess from there. We saw some nice kickouts from him at time, finding other open shooters, finding some backdoor cuts. And now this season, at least for now, that's not a part of the developmental agenda. It's primarily, can you live on the perimeter and can you do these things, knocking down triples, which, by the way, as we start to talk about the defensive end of the court for him, it does lend itself in my mind to thinking about Nicholas Claxton, a guy that we've always treated like a 5 because that's what he's been for the Brooklyn Nets, but saying, if Claxton had a perimeter shot and he had this defensive versatility and could do some rim protection, these things, how would you want to use him if he had a shot? Noah Clowney may be the developmental example of, if Nick Claxton could have knocked down perimeter shots, we would have done more of this with him. And then he would have been a slasher. And he obviously is a rim runner in a way we haven't seen necessarily from Clowney. But I do wonder if you just get some of the strongest traits out of a player and go, okay, this is the path for now, and we'll see where it develops from there.
Yeah, I can't even like put him and Claxton in the same package now. I think we're only comparing them because they're on the same team. Like, I don't really see them
probably
as
true. Right. Lean guys, not that big, and because we see them as we always have together.
I think, and that's fair. It's fair, by the way. Like, for you to do that, like, that makes sense. Like, this is what we watch every game. Like, this is what we've been watching for years. So you would always use comps that are closest to home. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I actually think that really only the fact that we've just watched Claxton a lot and kind of wished and hoped, like wish cast certain elements of his game that never really came out. That's the only reason we make comparison. There's really no other comparisons to these guys. Like, they don't really play at all. They don't play really at all alike. And I'll say too, like, defensively has not really looked very great this year. I mean, he got blown by a couple times last night. Tyler Hero blew by him at least twice on defense, where you're really hoping he's going to be able to hold up sort of like 1 through 5 switches. And I think he will be able to, but the defense has not been incredible this year. And this part that's not concerning to me because I think he is a high motor guy. And I think like the effort won't be a problem. So I don't think that's anyway. I don't know if it's a new system and positioning is weird, if it's just not kind of clicking, but it kind of isn't clicking with the eye test to starters. Like, he hasn't had any of those. Whoa, there we go. I feel like at the last year, and maybe this is unfair from a like just sort of just like kind of looking at things standpoint, but I think last year near the end of the year when he got unlocked for more minutes, right? Like, he finally came up. We had some games where he was like, we're like, whoa, yo, this is like, look at these kind of like eye-opening blocks, right? Some highlight reel stuff.
Yeah.
He had a game with 7 blocks, right? Like, he had a game 2 games before that with 4 blocks. This is last year. This year, that's just disappeared. Like, he has fewer blocks and fewer steals in more minutes. Well, he has the same amount. He has fewer blocks in more minutes this year. And like, so again, blocks can sometimes be schematic, and you can have guys that just kind of block hunt. And it looks great because they pile them up, and it comes at the cost of everything else. But we just haven't seen like that really pop off the page this year yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's funny. It made me think about, I wonder if you'll agree. If you remember, we used to talk about in previous iterations of the Nets with different coaches, we'd say, well, obviously, I mean, they're giving the effort on the defensive end specifically. You see them, they're moving, they're switching everything. And as the season went on, under whether it was Nash or whether it was underneath, last year with Vaughn, you and I both came to the conclusion of, yeah, they're running around a lot, but are they really doing anything? It's just mostly like, hey, high energy, arms are waving. Yeah, okay, is anyone where they're supposed to be? And the interesting thing there is that I think for Clowney, it might be, or I wonder, based on seeing some of the natural athleticism, natural talent defensively a year ago, maybe it is now. Now, Jordi Fernandez is here, and he's saying, no, we're running a real system. And that may take a step back to understand and get into rhythm with it before you can then kind of turn your brain off and just let the talent take over and let you kind of run wild. So we leave it there for now in Noah Clowney, except for this one regard. I want to get into Keon Johnson and Ben Simmons. Of course, just classic Locked On Nets scouting report ahead of matchups. But the last thing I want to leave you with on him is, just for fun, when you go in and you look at Noah Clowney and Ben Simmons sharing the floor, 109 minutes, a positive 2.84 rating, 114, 111 offensive, defensive. Noah Clowney and Nicholas Claxton, 83 minutes, 3.38 positive rating, 113, 109. And then any other combination, let's just use Claxton and Ben Simmons, net minus 6.33, 119 offensive, 125 defensive. So there's something alarming going on here in that combination we've always talked about, but there's certainly, hopefully, something here when we look at Noah Clowney and how he can combine with these guys for the remainder of the season, give him a chance to develop, and hopefully the Nets to develop some chemistry as well. But what about that Ben Simmons game? And what about that Keon Johnson performance? We'll do that to close things out here on a holiday edition of the Locked On Nets podcast in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. NFL playoffs are almost here. Not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong in the NFL, keep the season going with the NBA with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. Look, you go over to the Christmas Day schedule here for the NBA. I mean, this is an absolutely packed sports day. Tuesday, not so much. You got a little live table tennis, which I always love to see the stuff that FanDuel has up here. It's like, oh, you think it's a slow sports day? How about table tennis, friends, or e-basketball? Then we get into actual Christmas Day. One line that I actually don't mind here: Lakers +4. I don't know if you've seen the numbers. We're gonna get through FanDuel. Dennis Schroeder, is like a -70 in his 3 games since joining the Warriors. I'm taking that. I'm taking LeBron Christmas Day +4 over at our friends on FanDuel. You get started with $250 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. Just visit, there you go, FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, so to tie a pretty little bow on our Locked On Nets episode, turning our attention over to Ben Simmons and Keon Johnson. I do just want to, it's important that you do these things. When Noah Clowney's on the floor and there's no Nicholas Claxton or Ben Simmons, 140 minutes -37. I don't want to get into the details here, but Noah Clowney does need some veteran experience around him on the court. Now we turn our attention, though. As we exited yesterday's episode, we talked about how Ben Simmons, this guy, he's finally he's showing you something. He's going to play more minutes. You're not going to have any Dennis Schroeder. This is the man, ball in hand. And then he comes out and does, quite frankly, not surprising based on his track record with the Brooklyn Nets. He does exactly what we should have said he was going to do. Stop shooting the basketball, have 9 assists, and have us looking and scratching our heads afterwards going, what the heck does this guy do in between games when he thinks about his decision-making process? Please take it away.
Yeah, look, they're dealing with Bam here. Like, they're defensively schemed, like better than most other teams in the league, right? Like, this is going to be a tough sled in here just in general, just because, like,
you can't not shoot, though. You can't just say, well, what a hard defense.
Well, Ben Simmons will say, hold my beer on that. Hold my beer on that if you're saying I can't shoot, because this guy can go long stretches without shooting. It's fool me once, shame on you. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I just don't. It's our bad for even thinking like one game would undo sort of just what we've seen over multiple seasons. Yeah, it's just like whatever. By the way, next time he does it, I'll get excited again. So it's not even that. I'm not even just gonna. I'm gonna always try to trend positive here. If he has a game that he comes out and shoots double-digit shot attempts, I'll say that's great. Like, let's see more of that. And then if he comes out the next game and shoots 2 shots, we'll say, we'll scratch our bald heads, not you, me. You'll scratch your those luscious waves of yours, those luscious locks of yours that that you just get. I find your hair a little aggressive, by the way, toward me. it's like you're microaggressing.
Like it's like we start on to get the podcast going. You go, listen, pal, why is it coming at me through the podcast screen?
Like, put a hat on. Like, stop. Like, I got a hat on. You put a hat on. Just stop shoving it in my face. It's aggressive. Anyway, so I just think we're at a point now where it's just like our bad if we bring it up and react one way or the other. I do think this is like what we saw last night is probably really the low end of what we'll see, 2 shots in 30 minutes, but it's just not, it's just like, they're just in such a bad spot because even if you wanted to, it's like the offense can't really function that well with these 2 guys on the court. So it's like, even if you wanted to do this stuff, there's not always an opportunity for him to get to the rim with Claxton. So it's just, I don't know. Some of it's scheme too, and personnel, of which they are way understaffed when it comes to like the correct personnel to have with him.
No, all things dropping into the bucket. You come out the other side of it and say, okay, yeah, it's a bad game for him. And to your point, though, it is just comical that it's almost an all-time bad game from certain areas we want to see relative to what we just got the game prior. That being said, a quick tip of the cap here to Cam Johnson, who in 33 minutes was 7 of 15, was 3 of 7 from the floor, got to the line a couple times, the rebounds, the assists, 19-point performance for him. So he continues to play his role in making sure that teams find him attractive to trade for, and we'll get into that more coming out of the holiday. There's a lot of rumors and teams that want to put their hat into the mix. I'm actually going to be talking with Matt George from the Kings, so there'll be an episode, something around there when we start to say, hey, what are you giving us? Keep an eye out for that. The other 2 players to talk about. First, Keon Johnson, 28 minutes, 6 of 12, 2 of 5. Only got to the line twice. He's an undersized body, so it's almost impressive he was able to do that against Bam. 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 steals in this game, 15-point performance, and the only starter with a positive plus-minus in this game. This is a very, very good sign. Forget about Ben Simmons. He's always going to be the enigma. He's always going to, confuse you. But it has nothing to do with the long-term future for this team. And I don't know if Keon Johnson does either. But he does need to put together some games like this to suggest that he can be a contributor coming off the bench as he drafts other younger talent. He is still very young, still a former first-round pick. Really good balance for him. He obviously was disrespected by listening to our podcast and came out and showed that.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, he's only 22, which is like just so wild. Yeah. He's been in the league a long time. Like he's a lower draft. I mean, like he was out of the lottery because he kind of fell that draft. He's kind of bounced around now, but 22 is still really young. I mean, like what's Jalen? Jalen Wilson's like 23, right? Like is he younger than Jalen Wilson? He might be.
Yes, no, he definitely is.
Yeah, he's 2 years younger. He's 2 years younger than Jalen Wilson. Like, that's wild.
Wilson's
That's
24, yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. So I think like sometimes we get this idea where, you've been in the league longer, so it should have happened sooner. And so like Jalen Wilson still has like time to develop because he's only been in the league a year and a half and like summer league MVP and all this stuff. And then then you look at the birth certificates and you're thinking, well, actually, like would Keon Johnson have just been slaughtering the like college basketball over the last 2 years? I'm probably right. So like it's just weird when your timeline is different than others. And then because of that timeline, you get held to another set of standards by which now maybe front offices don't do this, but fans definitely do. So, if you just say, yeah, it's 2 years younger than Jalen Wilson, he's still hyper athletic and he has like lots of facets to his game. It just, what he struggles with is consistency, right? Like and when you are an undersized 2 guard, like it's like an undersized like 2 combo guard, probably you would call it. You just have to be hyper efficient from 3. Like that, there's really no other way. Like you have to hit threes or there's no place for you because you can't do there's just not enough else that you do, right? So you just have to be like a 40% 3-point shooter to even sniff like a long-term future at this size. And that's really kind of is that the whole story? Because he can get to the rim, he can finish at the basket, he's got ups, like he's got real hops. It's just like this other part, he just can't really shoot. He just can't shoot well enough.
Yeah, and I'll leave it on Keon because you mentioned about Jalen Wilson. It's like Jalen Wilson stays in college longer, so he's older when he gets drafted, so no one takes him till the back end of the second round, and everyone goes, yeah, I don't know, what do you expect? But all of those reps really help him out, and it seems like he's able to hit the ground running very successfully and is having a great second season for the Nets. Likewise, Keon, first round pick. Oh, you didn't flourish at all. Where was the pop? Where was the eye test? If he was in college right now for this entire season and came out next year, it'd be the timeline of Jalen Wilson. You mentioned it. Maybe we'd be thinking about him same way. He probably wouldn't go until later because they'd say, well, you were at college for so long. But there's something to be said about that just from maybe a rep standpoint or being able to get a little bit more under your belt. He's doing it in real time at the NBA level. And if he can get a few more of these games in the mix and find some level of consistency, then I think there's an opportunity for him, which is great. The other guy I want to make sure we made mention of just before we get out the door is Tyrese Martin, just because he's the guy you never thought we'd be talking about over the course of the season. He's played in 13 games. He's knocking down 45% from beyond the arc. He had another good performance in this one. Listen, he's the bubble up and fill in guy. It's not like we're talking about him being consistently in the rotation, but he's been like a pleasant surprise this season. And he certainly is not shy about jacking up triples. We've seen that in other games. He's been really fun to watch. He's 25 years old too. Long-term future, who knows, but probably a name that we'll talk about a lot as we get into the back half of this season, because those minutes are going to go up for him. He's just been a fun story to watch. I'm really happy to see a guy like that go from G League, come in and really make a name for himself.
Yeah, he's trading off the 8 for 10 against the Suns. So it'd be interesting to see, let's get like, 100 threes under his belt here to like really make a determination. But at the same time, if you can shoot 8 for 10 in a game, like you have something, right? Like if you can shoot 8 for 10 from 3 in a game, then like that just doesn't just happen by accident either. And so, when you have 2, and a 4 for 5 performance. So I think that's for sure. Like he's going to be a guy we for sure see more of over the course of the season. Has probably just enough size to get away with it too, like to play a little bit of 3. This is where sometimes like he and Keon Johnson like just are a little bit different. Like he's got 30 pounds on him, right? 30 pounds. And so it's just like that just translates just a little bit better to being able to hold up in other areas. So I don't know. It's always, I want to make sure too. It's so funny. One thing that we'll get out of here on this. Next year is going to be the Nets have so many first round draft picks that and they're going to get, and with some trades, they're going to probably bring in like at least one young player, you would think, from the Cam Johnson trade. And so it's just going to be a situation where we go into next year and it will be funny to see who makes the cut, because they're going to be competing right out of the gate. They're going to be competing with four draft picks. Plus you have to think Derek makes a jump to the next level next year after a year in the G League. So that's another guy. And so I don't know, man, it's going to be I think we're just going to see a real revolving door here for the next couple of years. And I'm hesitant to get too married to any of these guys because the numbers just aren't going to work.
Yeah, no, and I'll just be happy to see all these young guys playing right after all the veteran trades. You're all going to get your shot, so you put your best foot forward because this is the opportunity to maybe claim a role for yourself going forward for the Brooklyn Nets.
All right, everyone have a good, let's get out of here. No quick programming note, no episode on the 25th of December. And then we'll be back on Thursday morning for the next podcast as we roll through the rest of the week. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube. Let's get to 8,000 followers. Are we there yet? I'm going to check the number here real quick. Are we there at 8,000?
Take your time.
250 more to go. Let's go. I'm a little bit less than that. 250 gets us up over 8,000. Go subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube.
The worst gift is fruitcake. There's only one fruitcake in the entire world, and people just keep sending it to each other. And that was John A. Carson.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We're back again Thursday. I'm talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.